You walk out to your driveway, grab the door handle, and it hits you, that sharp, unmistakable smell of raw gasoline. You look under the car, fully expecting to see a massive puddle reflecting in the morning light, but the concrete is completely bone dry. You pop the hood, shine a flashlight around the fuel rails, the injectors, the pressure regulator, and absolutely nothing is wet. So where is that heavy fuel smell coming from? This is what mechanics refer to as the invisible fuel leak. Your vehicle is equipped with a highly complex network of rubber and plastic hoses dedicated entirely to managing fuel vapor. This is known as the evaporative emission control system. It is designed to capture escaping hydrocarbon gases from your gas tank, store them in a charcoal canister filled with activated carbon, and eventually route them through a purge valve directly back into the engine manifold to be burned off during normal driving. It is a critical emission system, but it also prevents your garage from turning into a highly flammable vapor trap. Over time, the intense underhood heat radiating from your exhaust manifold, constant road vibration, and just plain old age cause these specific rubber hoses to degrade. The rubber dries out, loses its elasticity, becomes extremely brittle, and develops microscopic hairline cracks. Sometimes a hose will even vibrate completely loose from its plastic fitting. When those volatile vapors escape into the atmosphere instead of being routed to the engine, you get that intense gas smell without ever seeing a single physical drop of liquid anywhere. It is incredibly easy to overlook because there's no liquid evidence, and a leak as small as 20 thousandths of an inch will trigger an OBD2 monitor. If you are throwing a P442 or P456 code, this is exactly what is happening. To fix this, you need to closely inspect the vacuum lines routing around the engine bay and the filler neck near the fuel tank. Look for any dry rotting, loose connections, or chafing against metal brackets. Replacing a damaged vapor hose is usually a straightforward and cheap fix, typically costing anywhere from $20 to $150 depending on which exact line is compromised. But ignoring it means you are literally letting your hard-earned fuel money evaporate into thin air while driving around with a permanent check engine light glaring at you from the dashboard. Now, speaking of wasting fuel and money, let's talk about the drive-through line or waiting outside the grocery store. There is a massive misconception still floating around the automotive world that leaving your engine running during short stops uses less gas than shutting it off and restarting it. Let me set the record straight right now. That advice belongs in the 1970s with clumsy carbureted engines that needed a rich, heavy choke of fuel just to turn over. Modern vehicles are incredibly efficient at the moment of startup. The high-pressure electronic fuel injection systems on cars built in the last couple of decades are perfectly calibrated to fire up with a precise, microscopic squirt of fuel. Official engineering studies and data logs have proven that restarting a modern engine takes the exact same amount of fuel as sitting there and idling for just 10 seconds. Let me repeat that. If you are sitting in a parking spot for more than 10 seconds, you are actively burning more fuel by leaving the engine running. When your car is idling, you are getting exactly 0 mpg. You are taking perfectly good, expensive gasoline and turning it entirely into useless heat and tailpipe noise. But the mechanical penalty gets much worse than just lost fuel. Extended idling periods mean the engine is not operating under any real load. Because there is no load, the engine struggles to maintain its optimal thermal efficiency. This low temperature state forces the engine to run slightly richer, which accelerates carbon buildup inside the cylinders and gunks up your piston ring. It also washes the protective oil film right off the cylinder walls, increasing friction and wear. People constantly worry about wearing out their starter motor by turning the key too much, but modern starters and heavy-duty batteries are specifically engineered and overbuilt to handle tens of thousands of start cycles. Unless you are just briefly pausing at a stop sign or stuck in slow creeping traffic, turn the key off. It saves your gas, it prevents your internal components from sludging up, and it keeps your engine running much smoother over the long haul. Before we get into the absolute worst place you can pump your gas and why a cheap fill-up might end up destroying your entire fuel system, if you are finding this garage talk helpful and want to avoid massive repair bills, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. It helps me keep bringing you the unfiltered, straightforward, mechanical truth. So, let's talk about where you actually buy your fuel and why brand reputation is not just marketing hype. We all love a good deal, and sometimes you see an unbranded station out in the middle of nowhere or a rundown pump offering gas for 20 cents less a gallon. Always choosing the absolute cheapest and least utilized pump can lead to severe, long-term fuel quality nightmares. Underneath every single gas station are massive underground storage tanks. Over time, water and sediment naturally accumulate at the very bottom of these concrete and steel vaults. High-volume stations, the ones constantly busy with cars pulling in and out all day, are constantly turning over their fuel inventory. Tanker trucks deliver fresh fuel frequently, the gas moves out through the pumps quickly, and any microscopic contaminants are either caught by the heavy-duty pump filters early on or diluted to completely harmless levels before they ever reach your nozzle. Low volume stations, on the other hand, might hold the exact same batch of gasoline for weeks or even months on end. During that extended sitting time, the ethanol blended into modern gasoline does something terrible. Ethanol is hygroscopic, meaning it acts like a sponge and actively pulls moisture straight out of the surrounding air. Eventually, the fuel absorbs so much water that it drops out of suspension, a chemical process called phase separation, creating a distinct, highly corrosive layer of water right at the bottom of the tank. Furthermore, bacteria and microorganisms can actually grow in this dark, damp environment, producing a thick, slimy sludge. As the gasoline sits, it also slowly degrades through oxidation, losing its light volatile compounds and effectively lowering its true octane rating. When you pump this contaminated, stale, low-octane gas into your tank, you are asking for serious drivability issues. It manifests as a rough idle, random cylinder misfires, and pre-ignition engine knock that forces your computer to retard the timing, killing your horsepower. Your internal fuel filters will clog prematurely, and the incredibly delicate spray patterns of your fuel injectors will become totally distorted by varnish and microscopic debris. It is always safer to spend a few extra pennies per gallon at a station with massive, visible traffic and a solid, consistent reputation for quality. And once you get that clean, high-quality fuel into your car, you need to stop driving around on a quarter tank. I see so many drivers constantly running their cars until the low fuel light is screaming at them, only putting in a couple of gallons at a time just to get by. When a vehicle sits, tiny mechanical contaminants, rust flakes, and fine dirt particles naturally settle at the absolute bottom of the gas tank. If you are constantly driving on fumes, your fuel pump is forced to suck up the very dregs of the tank, pulling all that concentrated abrasive dirt straight into your filter sock and potentially into the delicate pump armature itself. This acts like liquid sandpaper and causes premature pump failure. But there is another major reason to keep it filled, especially during the cold winter months or when temperatures fluctuate wildly from day to night. You need to keep that gas tank at least half full to prevent massive internal condensation. Gas tanks are not perfectly sealed vacuums. They have empty space filled with air. When ambient temperatures drop rapidly, the moisture suspended in that trapped air condenses against the freezing cold inner walls of the metal or plastic tank and drips right down into your fuel supply. Water in your fuel system causes severe hesitation, rusts out internal metal components from the inside out, and in severe freezing conditions, can literally turn to ice inside your narrow fuel lines, completely blocking the flow of gas and leaving you stranded on the side of the road. On top of that, your electric fuel pump is physically submerged in the gasoline, and it specifically relies on that liquid fuel to cool its internal electric motor and lubricate its spinning impeller. Running your tank down to empty means the upper half of the pump is exposed to air, causing it to run incredibly hot, which dramatically shortens its lifespan. Dropping a rusty gas tank or pulling the rear seats out just to replace a burned-out fuel pump is an expensive, labor-intensive job that you absolutely want to avoid by simply keeping the needle above the halfway mark. Now, moving away from the fuel system for a second, let's talk about the actual lifeblood of your engine, the motor oil. There is a very persistent, old-school mentality that putting a thicker oil in your engine, something heavier than what the manufacturer specifically recommends, will magically provide better protection and seal up old leaks. Let's look at the actual physics of this and why it is a terrible idea for modern cars. Running a thicker oil than recommended forces the internal components of the engine to fight against massive extra fluid friction and hydrodynamic resistance. Your crankshaft, your spinning camshafts, and your journal bearings have to physically push through this heavy viscous fluid, meaning the engine has to burn significantly more fuel just to maintain its normal idling rotation. Laboratory tests on modern engines prove that using an oil that is too thick can drop your overall fuel economy by 2 to 5%, and that parasitic loss is even greater in cold weather when the thick oil turns into the consistency of molasses. But the mechanical damage goes way beyond just lost fuel mileage. Modern engines are built with incredibly tight, microscopic machining tolerances. Let's take the BMW E93 series with the N52 engine as a perfect example. That inline-six produces around 230 HP and relies on a highly complex variable valve timing system called Vanos. The Vanos solenoids actuate the camshaft timing based on extremely precise, instantaneous oil pressure calculations. If you run an oil that is way too thick, or if you neglect your oil change intervals and let thick sludge build up in the oil pan, those specific solenoids cannot physically operate fast enough. The heavy oil cannot flow through the tiny internal passages and the protective microscreens in time to adjust the timing gears. This leads to severe mechanical hesitation, a sluggish throttle response, rattling noises on startup, constant check engine lights, and eventually a very expensive trip to the dealership. Conversely, running an oil that is too thin just to get slightly better MPG will cause the protective chemical film to shear under high loads and high temperatures, leading to rapid, catastrophic metal-on-metal wear. You absolutely must stick to the exact viscosity the engineer specified for your climate, whether that is a 0W20 or a 5W30, to keep everything operating smoothly. We are about to cover one of the most destructive and expensive hidden issues affecting almost every modern truck and SUV on the road today. But before I reveal the exact fix for that design flaw, if you are learning something new about keeping your ride out of the shop, make sure to hit that subscribe button right now. All right, let's get into the direct injection dilemma. For decades, traditional engines used port fuel injection, where the gasoline was sprayed into the intake manifold right behind the intake valves. Because gasoline is a fantastic natural solvent, it constantly washed those hot intake valves completely clean every single time the engine fired. But to meet stricter government emission standards and squeeze out more horsepower and better MPG, automotive manufacturers aggressively shifted to direct injection. The Ford F-150, equipped with the 3.5L EcoBoost engine, is a prime example of this exact technology. To generate that massive 400 pounds-feet of towing torque, the fuel is injected under extreme pressure directly into the combustion chamber itself, completely bypassing the intake valves altogether. While this provides great pulling power and decent efficiency for a heavy truck, it creates a massive, inherent mechanical vulnerability. Your engine has a positive crankcase ventilation system, or PCV for short. This system takes oily, unburned blow-by vapors from the crankcase and routes them back into the air intake to be safely burned off. In a direct-injected engine, without the constant stream of liquid gasoline washing over the back of the valves to clean them, those hot, oily vapors crash right into the blistering hot intake valves and bake instantly. This creates an incredibly thick, rock-hard layer of solid carbon buildup over time, a process known as coking. This heavy carbon literally chokes the engine, heavily restricting internal airflow, causing severe cold start misfires, massive power loss, and terrible fuel economy. You might notice your truck violently shuddering on cold mornings or completely struggling to find power when you stomp on the gas pedal to merge onto a fast-moving highway. Pouring fuel additives into your gas tank will do absolutely nothing to fix this, because the fuel never touches the top of the valves. The only way to truly fix this once it happens is a highly specialized process called walnut blasting, where the entire upper intake manifold is removed and crushed walnut shells are blasted at high pressure directly at the valves to safely chip away the baked-on carbon without damaging the metal. It is incredibly labor-intensive and usually runs anywhere from $400 to $800 depending on the shop. This is exactly why using a high-quality, full synthetic oil with a very low volatility rating, keeping up strictly with your PCV valve maintenance, and occasionally driving the vehicle hard under heavy boost to get the internal combustion temperatures up are absolutely critical steps for the survival of any modern direct injected engine. So there you have it, the absolute real truth behind the daily decisions you make that ultimately determine how long your engine will actually survive out on the road. It all comes down to fundamentally understanding the fluid mechanics behind the machine, not just blindly following outdated, generic advice you heard at a parts counter 20 years ago. Check your underhood vapor hoses regularly. Respect your local fuel quality by choosing busy stations. Always keep some gas in the tank to protect your pump. Use the exact right synthetic oil viscosity, and understand exactly how your specific engine breathes. I want to hear from you now. Drop a comment below and tell me what the absolute most frustrating check engine light or mystery drivability problem you have ever chased down was. What specific OBD2 code did your scanner throw? Let's talk about it down in the comments. And if you have not already, hit that subscribe button, give the video a solid like, and I will see you in the next one.